Ooh.
Hello, everyone. Welcome into our office hour. We're going to start off in probably another minute or so, give people a chance to get in and get comfortable. We have a little over 300 people registered for today, so we'll give them a chance to log in.
The numbers just blow my mind. It's so good.
Yeah.
The numbers are so good.
We have a very invested participant group.
Yes, and you guys do a good job of getting them there.
Thank you. So there is a question in the chat that I'm just going to answer it real quick about the evaluation from the last webinar, last week's webinar. The answer is the evaluation went out through our constant contact listserv. It went out at 2 p.m. on the following day. So please check your spam folders and make sure that it's not hiding in there. And if it is, please add us to your safe senders list, because that's the list we use to communicate with all our registered participants. Good to see everybody saying hello in the chat box. We do have closed captioning turned on if anyone needs that or would like that. Question in the chat, there are no CE credits for today. However, this does count towards CPRP hours. So we do encourage you to fill out that evaluation, because that's how we keep track of CPRP hours as well. All right. All right, I think we should go ahead and get started because it's almost 2:05, Lenora. What do you say?
I'm good. Let's go.
All right, let's do it. So again, welcome everybody to today's office hour, working with diverse populations, paying attention to implicit bias, anti-racism, and anti-oppressive practices and racialized trauma. So I'm Daniela Labate-Cavelli. I'm the Director of Psych Rehab Initiatives at NIAPRS. I'm here to sort of introduce you to Lenora and Marie, who are going to, or I should say reintroduce you to Lenora and Marie, who are going to take you through our office hour today. Kathy's here in the background. Thank goodness for Kathy. She's going to help us with Slido, because you guys loved Slido last time. So if you could just move us to the next slide, I'll do the housekeeping real quick. So we are recording today's session. As you heard, you'll be able to find the PowerPoint as well as the recording on the website. We do need you to complete the evaluation form. That's how we track your training participation hours to accrue hours towards your CPRP credential. We're going to try something different today. We're going to try a couple of things different today, because we are learning as we go, as they say. So at the end of today's live webinar, you will have the evaluation dropped into the chat box. So if you would like immediate access to that, you can certainly have it that way. If not, it will also be mailed through our mailing list tomorrow, along with the links to the recording from the website. So you'll see that tomorrow. Again, that may or may not be going into your agency's spam folders. So please just check there if you don't receive that email. That email is also how we use that listserv to connect with all of you and keep you up to date on all of our training events. So please make sure that you have access to that and that you're receiving that. And if you're not, just let us know, send us an email through the website and we'll take care of that. The other thing we're trying differently is around the keywords. So I know we love our keywords, right? So to sort of help things move along a little bit easier, a better transition, we've decided to put the keywords on the screen with the actual color on the screen as well. So we have 3 colors again for today. You'll see them on the screen. Sadly, if you're watching this recording, it's not going to be in the PowerPoint. So you've got to watch the whole recording to get the keywords. And again, that's because we need to make sure you're watching the whole recording for the hour accruals for the CPRP. We are going to start off with a little bit of an overview, but we also want to hear your questions. We had some questions sent in ahead of time, so we've incorporated those into the slide deck today. We're going to try to start off after the short review with those questions, but we want you to feel free to use the chat box and chat in your questions. You can chat them to everyone so everyone sees them, or you can chat them to the panelists, and Maria and I will be taking care of those and chatting or sharing them with Lenora and Marie. And of course, any questions that we don't have answered today, we'll collect and we'll formulate a Q&A that we'll post on the website if there are any. And my regular disclaimer is that any information you receive today is accurate as of today's date, which is March 22nd. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, Lenora, to do a quick little review, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Daniela. And thank you all for joining us today again and sending in your questions. And as usual, as Daniela said, if after today you have additional questions, please send them to Daniela. We'll make every attempt to answer, and Daniela will send the responses back to you guys. So we really want this to be truly a learning experience and for change to happen as a result of this. It's not enough for us to be here talking and acting nice and pretty. We want our consumers of services to act nice and pretty as well, and to get the outcomes that they so deserve. So one of the things that we did, Kathy, webinar resources. So, you know, we had our staff, Kathy engineered it, and a PhD, she's no longer a student, she's now a full-blown doctor, who helped us put this resource guide together. And it is really comprehensive. When I read it, I was like, wow, this is excellent, that I literally printed a copy and have it on my desk. And each week I'm going to go through one of these resources to refresh my own abilities, and also to see what's new out there that I need to know and I need to be aware of. So please, please, please use it and the resources. And on the screen, it is the way it is divided. You have, it starts with topics on health equity. Then you have the resource type. So we start with peer review articles. Then there are guides to it. And there are toolkits that support the conversation. And toolkits are very great because sometimes you really need consultants, but very often these toolkits are so detailed in how they put them together that putting a team together at your place of business, going through this, you can accomplish a lot by going through the toolkits. I know one of the questions someone sent in was asked if we have toolkits that are evidence-based or otherwise that can help, and you will get several toolkits through this. Do not be taken aback if you don't see evidence-based to it. That's a whole nother, I could do another 4 hours on evidence-based practices and who they've been evidenced for. So just feel that if you see something identified as a toolkit, there's been a lot of research, especially look on the agencies that have put them out there and they stand behind them. So use them. I have used them and several of my colleagues have used them. Websites, there are websites that you can go to and get a lot of information. There are websites when I look on Institute of Healthcare Improvement, Centers for Disease Control, Healthy People 2020. A lot of these websites as well have assessment tools that you can use to assess your organization's, assess the services, and you can get a baseline from where you are and you can move from there. So it really is, I think it really is nicely done, not because it's coming out of our shop, but it really is very well done. There are also books that you, and videos, you know, videos are kind of nice, it's short, they're spicy, you can get to learn from them. So please use it, put it out there, put it in your, on your website so that your other colleagues can get access to it. And don't feel anyway, we all have to go to resources. We don't know it all, and we're constantly trying to improve the work that we're doing. So when we present and when we're engaged with people, then we are kind of at the top of our game, and we're using the best resources or the latest resources that are out there. So I wanted to put a plug for our resource guide that we've put together for you guys. So we started out, quick review, we started out the conversation with the why. Why are we doing this work? And you guys gave us a lot of great responses. One of the key features of recovery approach is that it's not up to practitioners, family members, or others to decide what recovery looks like for an individual and what supports people need. This must be the decision of the individual. Understanding and acknowledging that the person's an expert in themselves is very, very key. This expertise is valid. It is just as valid, if it's not much more valid, than the practitioner's expertise, because who is better at knowing who you are and what you need to move to where you have set your goal to be? Not that we don't need help. We need a lot of help in helping to shape, helping to move us. But right now, I'm the best person to tell you who I am and what could help me. Then we could start the conversation. And we have our first, our thing is pink. Oh, I love that heart. I love that pink heart, Kathy. So pink is our color. There are no donkeys. Don't look for any donkey in the corners. It's just pink. The color is pink and it's a heart. Next slide. So what does, we talk about the psyche's data source that is owned by the Office of Mental Health. And as we did a extremely brief overview, welcome, Marie. I'm glad you have joined us.
Hello.
Marie was coming off from another client, and I'm glad she's been able to connect with us so soon. Someone mentioned in the chat that there's also the real and their cares. And then I know there are many, many more, even out of psyches. There are many other data sources that spin from that. So please tap into them and to get information that your clients and you have put in to help you to make some informed decision as to the work that you're doing. And if you guys know of others, please share them with us in the chat. Next slide, please. And then we went on, we talked about the social determinants of health. And, a lot of the work that we're doing, so much, we spoke to the fact that a lot of the care that we get and the outcomes that we see from ourselves and from others is, it doesn't happen with a practitioner. It doesn't happen in an office. So we have to be very cognizant about the other elements, other factors that do impact the outcomes that we so want and we should get. And we call these very often social determinants of health. I think recently I see them being referred to as the social determinants of care. So what are these determinants? They're factors in the environment where people are born, where they live, where they learn, where they work, where they play, where they worship, and where they age. If you think about all of those things, for me, it encompasses who I am as an individual. And we looked on what I'd call, and we did not put that in this PowerPoint, but the blue diagram that captures from the Kaiser Foundation, that captures a lot of our social determinants of health, as well as this very pretty diagram that's on your screen. And what was clear to us, that if you look and you overlay them and overlay race on top of these determinants, then you can see the inequities and the disparities in care. And a lot of these disparities came to light, although they've been around for decades and decades and decades, they came to light with COVID-19 pandemic. it was, I remembered hearing it on the news one afternoon, like, oh my gosh, there's so many disparities and so many this, and COVID has brought this out. Well, you and I do know that these disparities have been around for a while. And what COVID did was highlight them, which I'm very grateful for that, because for years we spoke about disparities and it was hard to get people to even understand what those were and to actually do something about it. What we also realized that in the middle of these disparities is racism. And we gave brief definitions of racism as it's a system consisting of structures, policies, practices, and norms that assign values and determine opportunities based on the way people look, the color of their skin, resulting in conditions that unfairly advantage some and disadvantage others, placing people of color at greater risk for poor health conditions. We did not go into racism a lot because there's a PowerPoint that we did, a few slides, I think about 80, 90 slides that's going to be or is on the website that will give you some deeper meaning as to racism. We wanted to elevate the conversation to intersectionality and speak more to there are these social determinants of health. However, when you overlay race and ethnicity and gender over those elements, then you can see clear differences and disparities are highlighted in outcomes as a result of that. We can't do one without the other. Marie, do you want to jump into the next slide?
That would be great. Thank you, Lenora. And thank you so much for welcoming me as I ran a little bit late. So we then jumped into our conversation surrounding racial equity and health equity and really took a deeper look into how we can transform our approach to working with individuals everywhere. And so part of that, of course, as I'm jumping a little bit, Kathy, so you're okay, looking at those attributes as well. But when we're looking at the racial equity and health equity, we recognize that to reach that point of health equity, we also have to include within the conversation, this conversation of racial equity. So we're looking at both of those, as you can see here on the screen. The health equity is the state in which everyone has a fair and just opportunity to attain their highest level of health. And so again, within that formation of health equity, we're looking at racial equity. Our racial communities also involved in this conversation as well. So again, we're looking at those social determinants of health and disparities as well. So we wanted to pay attention to improving access to behavioral health services by reaching out to people where they are. We looked at that from reviewing the previous conversation, the previous webinar, and really focusing on where those individuals are as well. Decriminalizing the ideas surrounding mental illness and substance use disorders. And then of course, recognizing and supporting structures in the workforce to show accountability within all of us. And so part of that conversation was also including cultural attributes into the conversation as well. So if we move on, we wanted to see the whole person, right? Who are we serving? How do they identify? Are those things that we're always necessarily recognizing, or is it only based on some individuals? We also recognize those cultural attributes and cultural identities for our team internally as well, right? Who do we make up as a team? How do our identities shift within that space as well? And how does that change the care that we're providing to other individuals? And then we looked at putting it all together in a really, really nice way. To conclude the session, we looked at ways to implement equitable practices into our service provisions intentionally and in a way that was sustainable for us as well, because that's part of the conversation is how can we sustain this practice overall? And part of that conversation, of course, was using a lens of a trauma-informed and equity lens throughout this conversation. Okay, so recognizing, and I know this was kind of at the end of our initial sessions, we were wrapping up a little bit quickly, but recognizing that healing from trauma isn't a linear process, right? Especially when people of color or other identities, when we were talking a little bit about those intersecting identities, how are they experiencing vicarious trauma and what those different traumas look like on the body. And that's kind of where we initially started to bring in those 6 different types of racialized or race-related stress, which we made sure to include within the resource guide as well, because I know I wasn't able to touch on it fully, but I, again, encourage everybody to review that a little bit more and something that I know that Kathy has been so great about of including is a kind of a depictor also of what it looks like for stress within the body, right? What does that look like? How are we showing up within our authentic selves as well? And I guess the next keyword is purple, not purple heart, not purple donkey, just purple.
It is purple.
It is purple. All right. Lenora, did you want to take this next
Yes, I
slide?
can.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I've become a fan of Slido. You know, I mean, I just can't, I'm just like Slido, do everything in Slido. I love it. I love it. So we're going to ask you to go to the link, and we're going to ask for your responses to engage a little bit. How can we transform mental health and addiction recovery services that address the disparities and supports more equitable outcomes? And that is a question, or it's coined from questions that we received. So I want to hear, put on your thinking caps based on what we shared just in our review, but also from our when we met with you guys earlier, last week it was, or was it Monday? Whenever. Last week, Monday, one day when we met and we had that great conversation with you. How can we transform? Think outside of your box. Think widely. How can we transform these services? By using purple. I like purple. I love that. Diverse staff, universal healthcare, meet people where they actually are. That's great. The language used in assessments, remaining aware, acceptance, social determinants, see people as humans, not patients. That is so key. Full integration with trauma-informed lens.
I like that listening is on here, right? That's one that we don't always think about, listening to the person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh God, we're sometimes just so busy thinking of what the answer is. We don't hear what people are saying. We are just thinking of how we should respond.
Yes.
Acceptance. Addressing poverty is huge. Education from every sense, educating people about the services, about what to expect, what is happening, plus general education, person-centered care.
And coming in the chat, be curious, use kindness, express compassion.
Compassion. That is excellent. And specific assessments, those are key. Because how are we going to know where people are at if we don't find some way to assess, to get to some baseline?
Being able to measure that, yeah.
I love develop stronger connections in the community. We need to know who is in the community, who is from the community. We need to know what our potential clients could be facing and what resources are there to help. That is so key. I love that. I love that.
And then again, in the chat, we have acknowledging our own shortcomings and lack of knowledge, be open-minded, again, meet people where they are, and you facilitate through empathy.
I love share our stories of recovery. Oh, stories are great to learn from. And what I find when I hear the stories and I know someone else is kind of experiencing some of what I experienced, I kind of like, oh my God, so what have you worked? I feel like, oh, I'm not alone out there, that there are others who are actually going through the same thing. Stories are great. Remove barriers, identify those barriers and remove them and see the possibilities. I like that because that's creating hope. That's saying, if I can see, then I can be hopeful that something will be different for me. That's huge. And there are several scales that deal with hope and several things that one can do to instill hope in someone.
Yes.
Taking away the stigma. That's great. These are great. These are very, very great answers.
And it looks like in the chat also, we got a resource that might be beneficial also, talking about addressing white supremacy. So it's address the white supremacy culture by Tima Okun. I could be pronouncing that wrong, but there is a link in the chat. So I'm sure we all can do some continued learning and engagement through this.
Oh, that's great. I
opportunity.
don't know of that resource, but I'll tell you, I will be looking into it so I can be better informed and I can use it in my next presentation or use it with you guys. We're going to be here for 3 years as we go through these conversations. So some of additionally things that I didn't see, but I'd love to put out there is that our funders, the folks who pay for these services, must hold folks who are delivering the services accountable for the outcomes that they want. There've got to be standards. Standards must be set to say, this is what we want, this is what we expect, and we need to begin to hold individuals accountable. And we have systems that can take it, that agencies, I'm not suggesting that folks at the state do what I'm going to say now, but in an organization, you have systems that can take it down to the individual practitioner's level. There are many, there are tools out there that allows you to do that, and not in a punitive way, but more in how we can improve what we're doing and how we can learn from our colleagues. If someone is doing something great that's working for a group of individuals, let's share that information with others in our own organization so that we can all learn from it. Ideally, what you hear a lot is that, you know, we should strive for having practitioners from the cultural groups where clients come from, or what that looking on clients, if they're from this cultural group, then we should have matching. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen very often. We don't have the resources to make that happen, and we need to acknowledge that. So knowing that, what can we do? And there are a lot of things that we can do. Usually we think about training and professional development. That's one of the first things that comes to mind. I'm going to encourage you, if you haven't done so yet, is to listen to the podcast that Marie and I did with Kelly Dumas from Best Self. She had some gems that you could easily transport into your organization, or I'm sure Kelly would be happy to talk to you about the podcast. Really, we got into some of the things that she did and her agency did. But one of the things, they were intentional. You got to be intentional about what you're doing. We got to say, this is what we want to accomplish, and this is how we're going to accomplish it. I don't know much of anything that happens by chance. That most of the outcomes I have in my life, I have to be intentional about it. I have to want it. And somehow once I plant that seed, I begin to work towards it. The other thing that you can begin to do right away is to create an infrastructure within your organization that support equitable outcomes. Pull together a small team, and the team must be cross-section across your organization, not just the person who loves racial equity work or the individuals who love that, but pull together folks from all different cultural groups, from different levels in your organization. Get your QI, your quality assurance folks involved, and begin to look on some of your policies, your practices. Begin to look, people ask about assessment tools. Pull some of them from the internet, from the web, and see what can we learn from that. Can we modify some of what we're using to ensure that we get these outcomes? And then, of course, I think our next slide, do you have any questions? And I'm sure there were stuff that you may want. Do you want to pause? We only have an hour today. And, you know, as rushed as we are, I still want to pause for a little bit to see if you have any questions on what we just shared. Okay, so nothing coming in the chat, nothing happening. Here is another question that we had as a part of our lesson today. What specific steps can you and your organization take to improve equity in its delivery of services? And I would say some of what we just shared, then those answers apply as well. And this said, David had a question earlier that was quite interesting.
And I've got that pulled up and I can read that to you right now, Lenora.
Please.
On the evaluation, one of the questions asked about factors of racial trauma. In checking the factors, child rearing was not considered a factor of racial trauma. However, when we look at the DAL test, it seems that such results coming out of young children seem to point to the acquisition of internalized racism can only come out of factors in child rearing. So how is child rearing not a factor of racialized trauma or of racial trauma?
And I will throw that out there to many folks. I know a little about the DAL test. And I would say that most of everything that we learn, we don't necessarily learn it in our home environments. And when you leave your home, that's where a lot of stuff happens. And I'll use myself as an example. I think that I'm one of the most steeped person when it comes to embracing culture within one's home, within my environment, with the folks that I expose my child to. When my child went to at a young age, 2+, almost 3, she's going to a Montessori school, and which I thought was an excellent school. I still think it's a very, very great school. And I'd recommend it to anyone. It had the structure that I was used to coming from Jamaica. And she came home one day and she says, "Mommy, I want to be white." And that broke my heart. And that I can equate to the DAL experience. Because if you look on the DAL experience, if I'm remembering correctly, you can correct me if I'm off, is that when you ask the kids, the Black kids, to say what resonated with them more, they pointed to the white kids, to the white dolls, and those were the ones they wanted to be. Well, my daughter wanted to be one of those kids. She wanted to be white, and I was just so devastated. I went into tears and I started thinking, what am I not doing? What else should I be doing? How else can I have the conversation? What? And I got into that blaming me for not doing what I should do as a mom, what I should do in our family when we tried so hard to make it so accepting. And I decided to go to the school. And I went to the school and I just shared with them. I said, "This is what my child is saying to me. I'm so heartbroken. What can you do to help?" Said, "I will continue to do what I'm doing at home, but I know I can't do it by myself because there's so many other forces around me that does impact what she's learning, what she's seeing as beautiful, what she's not seen as beautiful, and what she figures is most acceptable for human beings." And this school, oh my gosh, they went all out to help and brought in, which they hadn't thought about, they brought in racial equity training. They brought folks in. At that time, we had a Black mayor in Rochester. They brought him into school to have conversations, and other folks. They also, what I liked more than anything else, they encourage parents once a week to come into the school and actually have conversations with the other kids. So my mother went, when I couldn't go, my friends went. And sometimes it was just an hour to say who you are, some of your experiences. Nothing, it wasn't like some of the training we had. I remember one day I just picked up leaves outside and we played with the leaves and did some painting or pasted them on a piece of paper. But it was to bring in that presence into the school. And I'm hoping that helps, because it not necessarily is a child rearing. It's many other factors that say to us and a lot of individuals that we are not. And this is what we should be. And as you grow up as a person of color, and I'll use myself as a person of color in an organization, a lot of times you are not valued as you should be. In going through treatment, I went through treatment, and I won't go through what the treatment was or whatever it is. And I literally had to stop the conversation and pointed my very esteemed doctor to go to the research to say, what you're saying right now will not help me. I'm going to stop the conversation. And here's some research. I want you to go. And I know Howard University is the one that came to mind right away. They had done a lot of research in the area that he was treating me for. And I said, once you've done that research, let me know and we can continue our conversation. And that changed my treatment. Instead of going down this lane, I was able to get treatment that was better suited for me. And that he was given to everybody else who did not look like me. So, you know, sometimes it's not necessary. I'm not saying sometimes it happens in the home, but you got to take it outside of the home. And also in the home, it can happen because if you feel like this is what my child needs to get to be accepted, and I don't want the same thing to happen to my child, you may go down that lane. I chose not to go that lane because I wanted my child to be proud of who she is as a Black woman. So there are many things. So consider all your options, all the things that could happen in any situation, why you'd want a Black doll would be saying the white doll is better than who I am. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Lenora, too, for really being vulnerable and sharing some of your experience, because I think with that question surrounding trauma, right, of even part of the conversation hasn't always recognized that that can be a place of trauma for Black and Brown children at a young age. And I know within the chat, there was comments about media, right? Conversations about representation, having the Little Mermaid be a person of color, right? That was a lot. That's a really important moment for many Black and Brown children. And I know there was a lot of stuff on media about young Black and Brown children crying when they saw representation of the Little Mermaid look like them. And on the other front, we had a lot of other individuals very angry and in uproar that they would change that rhetoric, because in our minds, right, based on society and based on the norm, Little Mermaid is white with red hair, right? And that changed perspective. And because of that defensiveness and not necessarily wanting to see the multiple perspectives, we get into the space of not having these conversations. And so you showing up to your daughter's school and being that representation allowed opportunities for growth for that group of students at a very young age, because I know they mentioned that the doll test was between 3 and 6 years old. And so again, recognizing that that's a major part of it starts early, right? Children are like sponges. They're taking in those biases around us at a different age. And so I actually just dropped into the chat a podcast on Hidden Brain talking about unconscious biases that was just kind of redone as of recently, talking about the pros and cons and some of the areas that we're still working to understand the human brain, and also recognizing those different biases that start to creep in when we're talking about race and ethnicity within children's lives overall. So thank you for that. I'm just looking at some other questions here too. I know there was a question surrounding how can agencies improve cultural competencies, and it looks like everyone in the chat already answered that one for us. We've got listening, trainings, promote diversity connections, representation is important, right? Cultural competency. So it seems like a lot of people had some answers in there as well. Recognizing race questions within applications for employment. Are they needed? Are they not needed? Right? What are those systems in place that start to perpetuate these ideas when we're not necessarily consciously aware of it?
And I just want to put out there, Anne-Marie, that whatever it is that you're going to be doing, if you're going to be doing training, if you're going to be doing whatever you're doing to improve outcomes, Harvey Rosenthal, I think most of you guys know him. He and I have these conversations so very, very often, that if when you have these trainings, if when you do these things, we expect to see a difference in outcomes. And if there isn't a difference, then we need to revisit what we're doing and do it over again a different way, because we can't just be doing training for training's sake. We're doing trainings because we want to see our clients get better outcomes. We want our clients to be impacted. And somewhere, somehow, if we can't take them out of the equation, because I think once we put clients or participants or members or customers or consumers, once they are a part of the equation, I know that what you do will be different, because you're looking for some outcomes other than Lenora, you delivered a wonderful training. You're so great. You make us laugh. We love you. We da 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 da. I love that. However, at the end of the day, I should be thinking of how will this impact the outcomes of those who are receiving the services? How will this impact the outcomes of my colleagues who I work with? When I engage with Marie and with Kathy, I want to know, how is my engagement impacting how they feel as staff, how they feel working with me? Do they still want to work with me? Do they feel stressed? I need to be thinking about that. So the way I engage with them should be very, very different. We cannot just do this wonderful work over here, one side, and then on the other side, we're not connecting, doing the connection to those who we expect to see different outcomes from. We got to connect them, and it's not easy. I need to put that out there. It really isn't a very easy thing to do. It is very, very challenging, and nothing easy, nothing good isn't challenging. But I think if we wrap our heads around it and think seriously with our colleagues, with the folks we're working, we think about it, we include them. We said consumers know best what's best for themselves. We include them in that conversation. I think we'll get different outcomes.
And we've got a question I am assuming is going right back to you, Ms. Lenora. What types of accountability consequences would be appropriate? Is it limited to only retraining, or are there other opportunities?
And I would say those opportunities will depend on your organization and who you are. I think I was talking, it's interesting because I was talking to someone yesterday about holding folks accountable. And we have a fob that we take to enter offices. And the person said to me, what, change the coding on their fob? Said when they try to come into the building, it says no. That's taking it a little too far, but sometimes we have to do drastic things. And I think that's what the person was trying to get to me, that we can't be willy-nilly, we can't be all nice. If we want different outcomes, we got to do it. There are different ways. And I say a lot of times, metrics, criteria, there are different things we can say. If I'm saying to Marie, as the person who works with me, here's some things that I want you to accomplish. I'm going to monitor Marie over whatever, and I give her a time frame. I should be checking it with Marie. Is there anything I can do to help you to get there? And by that, by checking in, I'm holding her accountable to me, working on it, constantly working. So there are different ways in which to do that, to be much more involved with the individuals. But I'd say on an agency by agency level, if you look on what you say you want to accomplish, then start there with work plans, start there with outcomes that you want. So it's not enough to say, I'm going to change my mission statement. I would go back to the why. Why do you want to change your mission statement? What are you expecting to achieve? And that becomes the metrics. And you begin to hold yourselves, who will be responsible to make the change, and how will we implement that change? So you kind of peel back those layers. I believe in that why. You ask the why, the why, the why. When you start with the why, you normally get to the answers that you should get to that can drive your outcomes.
I think it's interesting too, when we talk about accountability. I know I recently had a conversation surrounding accountability for policies and procedures, right? If somebody is perpetuating microaggressions in the workplace, but there's nothing documenting how we have these conversations in the first place, then we're not going to have any resolution. We can have training and training and training and training. We can all identify what a microaggression is, but what are we doing after one occurs? How are we calling people in or calling people out? How are we measuring this? All of those things have to be part of the conversation, or they're just going to keep happening.
And it must be a part of the conversation. If Marie is my supervisor, I need to ensure that Marie knows how to identify microaggression. So when I go to her, she's not poo-pooing me. She says, oh my gosh, and we can have a decent conversation. Very often, supervisors don't go to these trainings. And one of the things that's so great about the SCORE train that NIAPRIS is putting together, facilitated, is that supervisors will be trained as well. So it's not just people at the practitioner level who are delivering the direct care. Supervisors will be trained so that they will know how to identify. When they look on the outcomes of the practitioner, they can say, oh, this ain't hunky-dory. What do we need to do? So they're looking at all levels. And I know NAPRES through this work is also going to be looking on the infrastructure of the organization. So they're really kicking it up to practitioner, to supervisors, and then looking on what needs to happen at the infrastructure level of the organization to ensure that these things are embedded and woven through the organization. It's not just one level, which I'm so proud of. That's why I'm a part of this work.
It's definitely, and I think you just echoed that it takes time. I think if you're looking at the infrastructure level, it's going to take loads of time, and sometimes we're just not patient. But that's what this work is time and intentionality and work every day. You know.
Yeah, it's not an overnight thing. You don't get up today and say, I'm going to do a training, it's over with and done. It ain't going to happen that way. We've done a lot of those, and we know it doesn't work.
No, ma'am.
So if we go to, I think we had another, how can staff group facilities call out insensitive language or language that stereotypes in a way that's supportive and fosters understanding? You want to start with that one, Marie?
I sure do. Insensitive language and stereotypes. I think it kind of goes back to what we had just talked about, right? We have to have the ability to be accountable for ourselves, but also the bravery and the ability to call people in and to call people out when needed. I think when we're calling people in within our community, within our coworkers, we're developing this trust and relationship with people, and that's where we can start, right? I have a relationship with Lenora. If Lenora says something that affects me in a little bit of a different way, I'm going to say, hey, Lenora, can you explain what you meant by that comment? And I'm able to do that because I trust Lenora. I've developed a relationship with Lenora. Regardless if she's my supervisor or my colleague, I'm able to engage in that conversation. And so kind of going back to that root of developing trust is really important. And part of that is also recognizing what are our policies and procedures say. If our policies and procedures are using gendered language and using language that's already insensitive, then we're perpetuating that in the documentation. So it doesn't matter if I call Lenora in or not. The policy is perpetuating that it doesn't necessarily matter in that same lens. And so when we want to call out the insensitive language or stereotypes, it's calling people in, using the right language, correcting people as necessary, and recognizing that it's coming from a place of support to build a better team, right? But also on my end, if someone's calling me in or calling me out, I don't need to put my defenses on, right? I don't want to become defensive and negate the hard work that's being done there.
Yeah, and I think, Anthony writes, this is very hard work to learn, to notice, ask about, and be challenged by new understandings of how we relate unconsciously to those of different race, color, ethnicity. And I would go on and on adding there, Anthony, gender, other disabilities, sexual orientation, we could go on and on. It requires the willingness to be vulnerable and see it through.
Yes.
It's very hard to be vulnerable, and to do this work, we got to be vulnerable. We have to be humble. Humility goes a long, long way. We do not know it all, and it's very hard for us to say we don't know. It's very hard to say we don't understand. Let's go figure it out. I have a way in which sometimes I don't know the answers, and I'd say many times I just don't know the answer. But what I do know, for me, somebody says something, or I hear something, or I read something, or I see a behavior and I says, that doesn't smell right. It doesn't look right to me. There's something off-putting. And I am very good about saying that to the person. Says, I don't know the answers, but it's a little off-putting for me right now, even if it's not addressing me, but I am witness to something. I will tap the person and say, something's a little off-putting for me. I don't know the answers right now, but I'm going to sure talk to others about it. I'm going to research it, and I'll circle back with you. And very often I do that because a lot of times I don't know the answer. I just know it didn't feel good to me. It's just a feeling. And I know we can't go by feelings all the time. That's so not scientific. But a lot of times that is what gives us the angst, and that is what gives us the hurt. And I think it's a place to start, that if you feel a little off, then you begin to create an environment where folks are willing to listen and to hear what you're saying and have the empathy to say, you know what, it is never my intent to hurt or to harm or to put someone in that place. Let me revisit what I just did or what happened. and let's circle back and do something. I feel that in organizations, a way that we can do this is keep these topics alive. I was on a meeting last night and we're talking about something, and you know, I said, we don't want this policy to be or this decision to be one of those that will sit on the shelf forever. You know, things around race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, intersectionality, they shouldn't be things that sit on a shelf. We should be constantly revisiting it. And I feel a way to do that is to revisit it in supervision, revisit it in staff meetings, revisit it in conversations that you have with one person or with a team. Make it center to your organization, make it center to your conversations. And the more you do that, the easier it becomes to talk about it. Because race and things of this nature is not easy to talk about. I had a tough time talking about it years and years ago. I had to say to myself, no, Lenora, if you want to do better, if you want to improve outcomes, you want to do so and so, you've got to talk about it. You got to put it in your conversation. So I have done that.
Definitely. And I think kind of going off of that, Lenore, I know that some comments are coming into the chat as well, right? If, you know, I know we've kind of mentioned policies and procedures, but it's really about finding ways to create healthy relationships.
Yes, yes, can't be done without relationships. Yes.
And for such a long period of time, we haven't had spaces within our work lives to be vulnerable, right? We were told for such a long time, don't be vulnerable. You go in, you come in, you clock out. That's kind of the mentality, but we need to be able to have healthy relationships, but also be able to engage with one another, because that's when we start to learn the most about other individuals. And I too have had, for many, many years, right? I've had challenges talking about race, talking about identity, all of these things, and it gets easier with time because we have these conversations, but it's never over, right? I'm still constantly learning about different communities, different identities, how I see myself, how I see others. Right? It's engaging with other people that allows us to recognize and start to create effective and consistent change.
Somebody's asking for the third color. What is the third color? We had pink, we had purple. What's the third color? We don't have a third color, Kathy?
Yes, we're gonna, it's on the next couple slides. So I think we probably can reveal the third color and then.
I think we should. It is 2:54. I don't want people to get off this call without knowing the third color. Oh my Lord, we need to put up the third color and then go back to the slides. So the third color is blue, intellectual blue. That's the third color. So we can go back to the slides. I don't want you to leave and don't have the third color.
So this was another question, and I didn't know if we have time to just.
I think we have answered some of that. Can we go to the one that speaks to cultural celebrations and programs?
Sure. I will also upload the resource guide that we were reviewing earlier, so that can kind of address this question also.
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy.
And I just want to interject about the resource guide, folks. This is Daniela. So we are working on trying to get it uploaded onto the website. We had a problem trying to upload it, but we are actively working on uploading it.
Perfect.
Thank you, Daniela.
So we have a few minutes. What are some ways we can give people the opportunity to express their culture or participate in cultural celebrations in programs and at the organizational level? I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So got back to Slido. We're back to Slido. I can throw some things out there. I can just say, do it and say it. And one of the things I'd love to say that we need to begin with is to define culture broadly. Culture is not just race, ethnicity, language, and gender. It's everything about us. I just say to folks, it's the blood that runs through my vein. So I can't live without it. I depend on it. So, you know, if you make it broad, then there are lots of ways to do this.
Yes. Well, I love that internalized societal validation and acceptance.
Yes.
Ask questions and listen. Ask and observe.
We just had International Women's Day. Did anybody do anything? That's a cultural group. Did anyone do anything about that at their agency or something? Just throwing that out. I want us to think very broadly as to how we define culture. I don't want us to stick within it's just race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. It is everything. And we think about the cultural attributes. If we go back to that slide, it gives us a whole list of stuff.
And this is a good opportunity to look at the community too, right? Of
Yes.
internal and external. What is your community doing to celebrate? That's part of listening and asking and observing, is leaving your space of comfort and entering another space to see how other people celebrate.
Providing opportunities for clients to discuss their culture, their celebrations, and their practices. I love it. Love that, because it's all about who we're serving. And our clients could be our staff as well. It's internal and those who come to us with services.
Yes.
I remember when if you believe it, I'm bald headed now, but I used to have dreadlocks. And when I started out, it conversation buzzing, because I went from straight hair to something, then I did dreadlocks, and it's a lot of buzzing. And it was just buzzing at work. It was buzzing in my family. It was like, what are you doing to yourself? It was very interesting for me to go through that period.
It seems like too in the chat, some people did some good things to celebrate Women's History Day. Some
Yep.
committees did stuff, engaged in workshops.
Newsletter to promote all cultures. I know Christmas, and those Christmas you get a lot of flat. Do we put up a tree? Do we say Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays? What do we use? And a lot of those decisions can be made at the organizational level. But what you need, I think we all want to be so much alike that we tend to not think as much of the differences. I'm a Christmas person, and I love when someone says to me, have a wonderful Christmas instead of just have a wonderful holiday. Because I do Kwanzaa, I do Christmas, I do, what are you talking to? I want it to be deliberate, but I also know there are folks who get offended if you say Merry Christmas or they hear you saying it. And a lot of organizations have gone from saying that to Happy Holidays. So it's something that can be discussed, and many times what we're finding out is that it gets so political that for funding purposes and otherwise, you tend to stick with what can I get away with, and I won't cause any angst. Ask questions and listen. I love it. So this is a great place to stop. And oh my gosh, it's never enough time. It really is never enough time, but I think we had enough time to kind of whet your appetite, to give you enough that you can say, oh, we learned this. Let's go back to our organization and explore some of what we learned. So thank you for being with us today. And I want to turn it over to Daniela.
Thank you, Lenora, and thank you so much, Marie, and to all of our participants for joining today. I think you're absolutely right. This was just enough to sort of start the conversation, and my hope is that this conversation will continue at least for the next 18 months for our first cohort of practitioner training. So we appreciate all of you for being here today. I want to remind people that there is, like Lenora's mentioned earlier, there is a podcast. It is available on our training page. You can click on the listen to podcast button on our website, and that'll take you to the podcast. You can listen to it either on Spotify or through our YouTube channel. And if we move to the next slide, I just want to, we already talked about the keyword. There we go. Thank you, Kathy. Just want to remind people about next month. Next month, we're going to talk about sharing power and developing non-hierarchical relationships with the folks that we support. The webinar is April 12th from 2 to 3:30, and the office hour is the 20th from 3 to 4. And if you haven't already done so, please register on our website. I'm going to ask Shay, who's working in the background, to drop the evaluation link for today's office hour into the chat. So if you'd like access to that, you can certainly click on that link and you should be taken straight to the evaluation link for today. We'll also be sending it out tomorrow to everyone as well. So you'll have a couple of different opportunities to access the evaluation for today. So with that, we are 1 minute over time. So I'm going to say thank you again to all of you for joining, and we hope to see you all next time. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you very much.